And it's my pleasure to invite Subuhi Kanji and Priyanka Devji. Namaste, welcome.
Namaste, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely.
Namaste.
Namaste. Subuhi Kanji is a Supreme Court lawyer, writer, and activist, and really excited to have her join this. Heard a lot about you, have been reading many things that you have written, and following, at least since the time of CAA, have been following your writings as well. And Priyanka ji, she's a deputy editor at TV9 and an anchor. And one of the first videos that I actually looked about and tried to find out information about CAA was done by Priyanka ji, and that video had gone pretty viral. And I'm also very happy to hear that you have a U.S. background as well, having been raised in the U.S. and then moved to India, so you can understand kind of the situation that that the U.S. Hindus and Canadian Hindus are in when it comes to some of this false propaganda and just understanding and confusion around these laws. So today we're going to aim to bust some myths. We're going to talk about some of the intricacies around this law, and just have a good conversation. So I want it to be a casual conversation, but at the same time, let's focus on certain types of particularities. So Priyanka ji, maybe if you want to, your audio is on mute. If you want to just maybe start yourself, what is CAA in your words? What is like the idea behind the CAA?
That's a loaded question. That's a good first question. Okay, so I think, well, if you looked at my video, the CAA is basically the citizenship. It was a CAB before, Citizenship Amendment Bill, and of course it was passed by both houses, so it became the Citizenship Amendment Act, and it is basically to help those that are religiously persecuted in India's religiously persecuted minorities, I should say, in bordering countries. So there's been a lot of confusion about it. It's led to, as you guys know, riots in India. I think a little bit of commotion in the US as well. That's become pretty significant. But there's been a lot of confusion about it because people have linked it with things like the Assam Accord that have happened in the past. Things like the NRC, NPC came in at the same time. So I think there was massive confusion about it. And of course, there was a narrative that kind of carried the wrong story. And when I say wrong, misrepresented and unobjectable facts. So I'll leave it to that. And then maybe you can ask me some specifics so that we can break it down.
Absolutely. And so a great point. You mentioned about the bordering countries and stuff. There's always people say, well, why only these three countries?
So the bordering countries are specifically Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, right? And religiously persecuted minorities. Now, I think one of the main questions that you'll probably ask both of us is why is it anti-Muslim, or why is it considered anti-Muslim?
Exactly.
Yeah, so Subuhi, feel free to jump in whenever you want to jump in. But first of all, I think there's a lot of confusion about this Muslim element to it. Now, the CAA, if you actually take it in hand, which I'm surprised a lot of people just didn't do. I interviewed law students over here, went on the street and talked to students, and they just had not even pulled up the act. When you pull up the act on Google, the entire thing is there. It's just about 3 pages long, not even 3 pages single-sided. So not that difficult to read. Now, religiously persecuted minorities in neighboring countries of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, those are regarded as Muslim countries, right? So if you're a religious minority, you're anything but a Muslim, right? So that is where this anti-Muslim sort of misinformation is coming in. But it's absolutely false. So this is why it deals with the bordering countries. And also we've had a lot of issues in the past, like, for example, Bangladesh with the Assam Accord in the past. There have been a lot of problems with immigration and illegal immigration deportation as well. So this is not very different than any other sort of, I think in the US, it's every single country. I'm just trying to run a list of countries in my head. They all have a very similar thing in their constitution about illegal deportation and illegal immigration, right? So this is really nothing different to that. One thing that I could maybe recommend is maybe the name could have been changed. Maybe that's causing a bit of confusion. But if you actually read the act, it's nothing more than what the U.S. law says about illegal deportation and illegal immigration.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that the Lautenberg-Specter Amendment, which is a famous amendment in the U.S., had actually specifically selected, I would say, the Jewish minority, and then eventually Iranian religious minorities also, when there was an amendment happened for that particular Lautenberg-Specter Amendment. So a lot of times people get confused that different countries have different laws, and it's very, very normal. So I consider this as an inclusive law that is really trying to help those that are facing extinction and severe persecution. And we saw in the video on our website, kona.org/CAA, you will see a lot of information that is illustrating this information. So I'm glad you brought that out, because it's not necessary. Different countries have these laws all the time, so it's nothing out of the ordinary. So maybe we'll come to Subuhi. Subuhi, what are your thoughts? People have spun this as an anti-Muslim, anti-Dalit law, and which kind of boggles my mind. So perhaps you can share your thoughts on that.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nikunji. The video which I just saw, I think that is so relevant in today's time. And, I literally had tears in my eyes, because you cannot imagine the plight of those people. It is easy for us to, arrange these conferences. It is easy for us, for me to, stand or sit on a dais or deliver a speech on the subject. But, the pain these people go through, it is very important for everybody to understand, from each and every country of the world. So there are questions like, what is CAA? I can understand that is a technical question, because many confusions have been created. Some people are misunderstood about it, and some people are maliciously and deliberately creating confusions. But I would definitely come to the legal aspects of it. But just give me a few moments, because I would like to cover the entire concept behind it. When I hear questions like, what is the need of CAA? When I hear questions like, is it anti-Muslim? Or what about human rights? Is it human right violations of Muslims? These questions amaze me, Nikunji. And I'm sure you would agree with me, because as an Indian Muslim, I live with so much dignity and with so much pride in my country. And I would tell you why these questions amaze me. See, everybody, like all of us, know that the partition of country, our country partition of Bharat, happened on the basis of religion. Why it happened and how it happened is a different theory altogether. That concept of Ghazwa-e-Hind and making India Islamic State, that is a different subject altogether. But after the partition, minorities from both the countries were still migrating. Minorities from India were migrating to Pakistan, and minorities from Pakistan were migrating to India. So to protect their rights, there was a Nehru-Liaquat Pact, and Nehru ji was the Prime Minister of India at that time, and Liaquat ji was the leader of Pakistan. So there was a Nehru-Liaquat Pact which said that, okay, both the countries will make certain protective laws for the minorities. And in case, because India was a secular state and Pakistan was an Islamic state, so it was decided that if Pakistan would fail, if an Islamic state would fail to protect the rights of those minorities, India would pitch in, and India would always welcome those people with open arms. So this is nothing which has to do with the present government. This subject has been, cropped up since ages. Like we have been seeing that minorities were persecuted. So there are reasons why I would like to tell you that it is nothing against Muslims can ever happen in India. Like, India is a secular state, one. Then part 3 of our constitution speaks about fundamental rights, article 12 to article 35, and specifically article 25 to 30 are specifically for minorities, religious, cultural and linguistic. Since partition till today, at the time of partition, Muslims were 3 crores in India. Right now, they are 30 crores. So there is not even a question of persecution of or any human right violation of, even legal right violation of Muslims in India. There are lakhs and lakhs of mosques and madrasas in India. And all those madrasas and mosques, they are not even under the government administrative control. However, most of the temples are under the government control. And there are Muslim institutions who receive donations even internationally, and even the donations are not taxable. There are so many facilities, aid, support, policies, that too government sponsored, which Muslims get in India. Then there's a specific minority ministry in India. And despite being secular, all the Muslim personal laws are still running, parallel judiciary, parallel education system, everything is going on in India. And all the premier positions like president, vice president, chief justice of India, home minister, education minister, etc., have been proudly held by Muslims in India. On the contrary, let me give you a quick picture of Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. All three countries are Islamic state. They have Sharia law. Hindus' customs, practices, marriages, etc., are invalid constitutionally. Imagine your existence is invalid in their country constitutionally. So there is nobody to even listen to their plight. In Pakistan, from 22%, I think approx 2% Hindus are left. In Bangladesh, from 23% to 7%. In Afghanistan, forget about percentage. You can count them in numbers. So where are those Hindus? They are either killed or all of them have been converted. And this has been confirmed by United Nations Human Rights Commission report. This is not just my opinion. This has been confirmed. And how many temples have been broken in these countries, and how many NGOs, institutions, or foreign funding these people are getting to protect their rights. Nobody is there to even listen to them. So whose human rights are being violated where? This I wanted to clear, and maybe like Priyanka ji would like to jump in and take it further. Then I would probably tell why CAA was necessary and what are the technicalities of CAA, because these people were persecuted so much, not just legally but morally, ethically, socially, financially, psychologically, that to get rid of that persecution, these some of those people migrated to India through valid route. Of course, they have valid passports. Of course, they travel to India through valid and legal route. But they are still living in ghettos. They are still living in slums. They do not have citizenship right. They neither have citizenship right, nor do they have any citizenship. They neither have citizenship of India, nor do they have any citizenship rights in India. And I would also like to tell you, these people are just approx 34,000 in numbers. So what is such a hue and cry about this thing, that if we are giving this thing on the basis of human rights to just 34,000 people, what is the hue and cry about? I do not understand. So I would come to the technicalities later. Let Priyanka ji add on if she has, to refine what I said, what I already said.
No, that was really, really good. And then just to add on to what you said, I was reporting and I met quite a few of the refugees actually that have come back under the Citizenship Amendment Act. And, I think there was a very famous, I'm not sure if it reached the US, but certainly in India, there was one baby that was named Nagrikta, which is citizen, right? So, or citizenship. So, and I think PM Modi had also recognized that baby, right? Because she was the daughter of a refugee.
Yes.
But, so I met the parents of that baby actually. And, what they were saying, we asked them, where were they from? They were from Pakistan. And, they said that, they really they had no dignified life over there. Now that they are back in India, it is the first time that they are experiencing a dignified life, dignified rights and things like that. So I think that, as Subuhi was saying, it was 34 to 35K people that this act was meant to help. And I think one of the other things that Subuhi may want to explain were the detention centers and things. I know, Nikunj, you and I spoke about that a little bit before, actually, right? But these detention centers were also part of this deliberate narrative to spread misinformation and fake information about the CAA. So Subuhi, if you want to start out on that in terms of technicalities, and then I can add on.
And I can tell you one thing. Sure. One thing I would talk about that, as far as detention centers is concerned, is really interesting, because what is happening in the U.S., there are certain organizations that are drawing a parallel between the Jewish Nazi detention centers, like the in the Holocaust, and the CAA detention, which is bizarre and very dangerous, because it's completely falsified. And I was shocked to see that actually people have officially said that the CAA is our Holocaust. Whose Holocaust is this? Right? So it's a very offensive statement, and it's a completely bigoted statement to say something like that. So I just wanted to share that that's what has happened in the US. So Subuhi, go ahead, please.
I saw an Al Jazeera documentary, and there was a guy, randomly and that was made to show, I think they had either play acted and that came out as fake news because somebody called it out on social media. That's the magic of social media, I guess. But the documentary was basically a man putting, a very poor rural man kind of putting in nails trying to build this detention center, which Al Jazeera was trying to pass off as a CAA detention center for Muslims. And that was completely not true. So Subuhi, I give it to you.
Sure. But this is actually a frequently asked question when it comes to, CAA or NRC and, things like that. But it's a very interesting question and people must know. See, we Indians are very emotional. We people, we never want to hurt anyone or, to violate anybody's human rights. That is why these anti-national or anti-Bharat forces try to emotionally incite us. This thing has been just created, this narrative of detention center. Let me tell you, the concept of detention center is not new in India. They have been in India since 1955 only, after the partition, because when the formal boundary was decided, people used to, infiltrators used to enter into the country. So just to let me give an example. For example, if you catch someone who's violating Indian Passports Act or someone who's violating Indian Foreigners Act, obviously he's not a rapist, he's not a murderer, so you're not going to keep that person in Tihar jail or some jail of India. So you need to have some place to keep those people for some time before they are deported back to their country. So detention center is, if you just rename it, we can rename it as transition center. Those people are caught and we need to keep them for some time in detention center. So that is everything which I want to say about detention center. But another thing I want to say, which is very important, that there is a huge contrast between Germany and India. We never believed in racial or religious supremacy of one over the other. One point. Indian national ethos never talk about killing people or, that we are superior, you are inferior or something like that. We believe in Atma, Paramatma are same. We believe in Vedant, which says, Ahem Brahmasmi, yani main hi Brahm hu, Tattvamasi, tum bhi wahi ho. So Indian ethos never believed in differentiation or categorizing, people and putting them in boxes. We believe that even soul and the universal consciousness are the one and the same thing. It is well said, I think, by Swami Vivekananda only. Nikunji, you have his picture at the background. He once said that India, I specifically noted this statement because I really liked it. Swami Vivekananda once said that India is a melting pot for different civilizations. But today, many acidic substances, like, this I am saying, this was not said by Swami Vivekananda ji. Many acidic substances like jihadis, separatists, terrorists, Naxals, communists, etc., they have poured into this pot, and they are, even melting the pot itself. So, we have all the right to identify the acidic substance. If we are identifying the infiltrators, there is a difference between infiltrators and refugees. There are difference between people who want our help, and there is a difference between people who are just coming and living in India in the garb of being a citizen and trying to eat away our, country and the soul of our country. So right to private defense is a human as well as a legal right. So I think NRC and CAA both were very important for India right now, and I'm really proud of the present government that they had the guts to, at least take the initiative and stand in front of all the anti-national forces and, just say it proudly that we will have it, we will apply it, and you do whatever you want to do. So that is what I would like
absolutely.
to add about detention center.
No, very good. And speaking of that, so let's build up on that theme, because speaking of detention center, there's a fear that's being created that, this law is eventually going to exclude all the Muslims of India. Right, there was statements made by certain U.S. candidates, presidential candidates, that all the Muslims of India are under trouble, in jeopardy. This law will jeopardize their citizenship. So there's a lot of, again, misinformation, and many students were concerned about this because naturally, we all have friends who are Muslims and stuff like that, and we don't want to be in a situation where we're saying, hey, we are going to eventually, or India is going to ban all the 200 million Muslims there are. That's a pretty ridiculous nonsense. So I'd like maybe Priyanka ji, you can start with that. Maybe will Muslims be excluded in this CAA, the new laws? Does it impact Indian Muslims or Indian citizens who are Muslims?
No, it does not impact Indian Muslims at all. There's nothing religious about the Citizenship Amendment Act. The only thing that is religious is, as Subuhi said before, the bordering countries are Muslim states, right? And they are officially regarded as Muslim states. So that means if you're Muslim, you are not a minority of that state. And all the more, you are not a persecuted minority of that state. So that is the only religious aspect of the Citizenship Amendment Bill. And then, as I was saying, for detention centers, I went ahead and looked up that detention center for Al Jazeera, and I made a couple of videos, kind of busting those misrepresentations. So we actually found out that by and large, the detention centers that you did see on the news and in mainstream media, like Al Jazeera, BBC, the Wall Street Journal, a bunch of different papers, a bunch of different online portals, the detention centers that you saw were actually ironically created by the earlier Congress regime, by and large, and this was according to the 1985 Assam Accord. Now, Congress and urban Naxals, I believe, created this narrative, and it's on record because PM Modi has said this, that Congress and urban Naxals are trying to create this narrative and are lying about detention centers for Muslims. So, to answer that question, I'll just... I think I heard my own echo. But
Sorry.
to answer the question about detention centers, if they were built with such pomp and at such a fast pace at the time, they were showing that these detention centers are coming up and people are constructing them. Well, what's happened to them now? What suddenly happened? I mean, PM Modi is still in power. Who's in the detention centers? Where did they go? So that just shows you the power of a fake narrative. And, all of a sudden, those same people that were touting these detention centers, they're not talking about them anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting because, I think all of you had mentioned that India has moved on from the CAA story. But in America and in Canada and stuff, we're still seeing this. We're seeing cities, 7 or 8 cities have passed anti-CAA resolutions. There's still, and we'll see this in the next panel about students, there are in high school and middle school, as we were talking yesterday, there are students who have been told that India is building these types of ghettos and India is building this type of like exclusionary act in the name of civil rights. This is a wrong type of a thing. So maybe Subuhi,
where are they? Can you locate one of them? Can you take us to one of them? Can we see them?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
They exist in oblivion, some kind of alternate universe, unfortunately. But Subuhi, coming back to you. So there is a discussion that happened around Supreme Court. So there was a couple of articles that I read that, you had mentioned about certain articles in the Constitution. They had mentioned that Supreme Court can actually throw out this bill or act now. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I would like to answer it with a counter question. Why haven't they done it till now? See, whenever Supreme Court feels that a law has to be scrapped down or it is unconstitutional, generally they just look at 3 things. First, what was the intention of making that law? Citizenship Amendment Act was to give citizenship to, people who were being persecuted. So it was brought in for human rights. It has nothing to do with any specific religion. Religion was not the only criteria. Human right violation was very important criteria. So intention was definitely good, noble, and very much required at that time. So on this ground, obviously, they are not going to, scrap the law. Second thing Supreme Court looks at is whether the proper due course of law has been followed or not. The law has been, as Priyanka ji rightly said, the law has been passed by both the houses of parliament. So the law has not been passed illegally. Thirdly, last but not the least, Supreme Court also looks like, does it violate any article of the Constitution? People who are opposing CAA, I ask them, you just name one single article of the Indian Constitution which has been violated by Citizenship Amendment Act. They are not able to give even a single article that this article has been violated. What they say is, let me give you an example. They say the preamble of India talks about India being a secular state. So you cannot bring a law specifically on the basis of religion. This is the only ground which they're using again and again. But it is falling flat because it is India's Supreme Court's judgment only that although preamble is a part of the Constitution, preamble is non-justiciable. You cannot challenge a law on the basis of saying that it violates the preamble. If you have to challenge a law, you have to show that it violates some article of the Constitution. And even if some article of the Constitution contravenes with the preamble, then the article supersedes. Even this has been said by the Supreme Court. So that way is also their reason falls flat. Then they say it is violation of Article 15. Article 15 of Indian Constitution says that no discrimination, only on the basis of caste, creed, religion, place of birth, and gender. And they forget that there is a very important word, only. No discrimination only on the basis of either of these things. So only is absolutely not applicable here. Religious minorities is just one aspect. Human right violation is another aspect. It was decided at the time of partition, that is third aspect. Nehru-Liaquat Pact was there, that is fourth aspect. It has been, this question has arisen so many times because those people needed our attention. That is another aspect. So only on the basis of these falls flat. So I'm 100% sure the Supreme Court is not going to do anything against Citizenship Amendment Act. It is very much legal and very much need of the hour, if I would
Absolutely. Say. And so keeping with that, I think there is a discussion now, like after CAA, it's NRC and NPR, right? So I want to, Priyanka, you had done a video on this thing, like, CAA, NRC, NPR. And the narrative that I've been hearing is that, CAA, okay, fine, CAA may be okay. But when you combine it with NRC and NPR, all like a doomsday scenario is coming, So can you maybe share a little bit about what NRC and NPR really are?
Yeah, and I mean, just to answer, where is that doomsday? I mean, it's life as it is, right? Right now, where's the doomsday? I'm still online. I'm still very comfortable, as are all my friends in India and across the country. So there's no doomsday over here. But basically, the NPR is the National Population Register, right? And it is a register of usual residents of the country. That's basically what it is. Now, when we look at the NRC, that's a citizen register, which names every citizen of the country, right? Or the name of every citizen in India is recorded. So, I mean, if you just think of it, 1.3 billion people, that's going to take a long time. So the rules of it have not come out yet because, of course, the entire world was hit with COVID right after. So the rules have actually not come out. But NPR and NRC, I mean, if you think about it, what goes on in my mind, and as you said before, I do have a background. I grew up in Chicago. So the first thing when I looked up what NPR, NRC actually was, number one, it's basically like a census. It's nothing different, right? It's basically a register of the country, the name of every person who is a citizen of the country. So it's a gigantic directory of sorts, I guess you can say. But it's nothing different than a census. And a census is carried out in multiple countries. It's not just the USA. It's not just in India, but it's in many countries, in most countries. And that is important for demographics of a country and to make policies, right? So there's nothing really doomsday about it. I mean, when you look at it, when has the US Census caused a scenario of any sort of doomsday whatsoever? So you just have to think about it like that. I think that what happened here was they kind of put it together, and because the rules of the NPR and the NRC were not disclosed, right? All of the rules and how it was going to be carried out, it was not mentioned at all in the news. So I think that this sort of deliberate narrative of the other side, this counter narrative, took advantage of the fact that it wasn't really clear what it was, and they kind of tied it in. And that's basically what happened. But if you think about it and if you look it up, I mean, simple Google search, NRC, NPR, you'll be like, oh, okay, it's not that scary, which it's not.
And a really interesting thing is that I believe that in 2015, it was the Supreme Court that actually mandated that the NRC be taken, sort of like implemented in that sense, right? So it was coming from the Supreme Court itself, right? So isn't it like the government is just carrying out whatever the Supreme Court had mandated?
Exactly. And let's keep in mind also, in addition to all of the articles and parts of the Constitution that Subuhi mentioned, we also have the Citizenship Act of 1955, right? So that still stands no matter what, even with an NCR and I keep mixing up the act. I'm terrible with acronyms, by the way. The NRC and the NPR. But the Citizenship Act basically states that there are 5 ways to become an Indian citizen, right? And that's by birth, descent, registration, naturalization, or incorporation of territory, right? So these 5 ways still stand. So how is it that an NPR and an NRC can exclude somebody based on religion somehow? There's no possible way. And by the way, it's also Indian law that nobody can be excluded for being a follower of any religion. So in that sense, whatever narrative that anybody is trying to push otherwise on the NPR and the NRC, it's absolutely false, because you still have these laws that check it.
Correct. And what's interesting is, so people say, oh, only one community will have to show like their passports or like prove it. But from what I understand, it doesn't matter whether you're Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Muslim, Christian, you have to show your citizenship identity, that you are a citizen of this country. So it's not excluding one particular religion or one particular community. It's going to apply to everybody. Is that correct, Subuhi?
Would you please repeat the question?
Yeah. So as Priyanka ji had mentioned earlier, that it's applicable for every Indian, every citizen basically. So it's regardless of religion, right? So the idea here is that a lot of times people think, oh, it's going to exclude Muslims only. But from what I understand, it applies to all citizens from all different religious backgrounds. Is that correct? Is that how the law is, the NRC and the NPR?
Absolutely, Nikunji. See, citizenship laws are in every country. India is not the first country which is having citizenship law. Like Priyanka ji rightly mentioned that, America also has censors. It's just that India has always been so loving and motherly towards people. Like we believe in Atithi Devo Bhava. Like we treat even the guests like gods. So that is why we have we are actually being taken for granted. If you ask me, in a layman's language, citizenship law has to be in every country. It is there in every country. And actually India also had Citizenship Act 1955. It's just that it will be followed properly now, because many anti-national forces have started eating the country, and we really need to know who all are the citizens of India. And there is a reason why citizenship law should be there. Am I audible to you, Nikunji? Because am I audible? Okay, because I can't hear you.
I'm on mute. That's okay. You can continue.
Okay, sure. See, I would like to tell you why the classification of citizenship is important. See, there are certain rights, there are certain privileges of a country which are given only to a citizen. Like if I talk about India, and if I talk about Indian Constitution, Article 15, Article 16, Article 19, Article 29, and Article 30. And let me not forget right to vote, the legal right. All these things are special privileges of an Indian citizen. Let me give you an example. If a guest comes to your home, of course you will give him good food, you will give that person comfort, respect, everything, human rights, whatever they deserve, you would give them. But you would not give them decision making powers of your house. You would not give them to start deciding what color of wall you would have. You would not give them access to your bedroom. There has to be a decorum, there has to be a line between a resident of the house or a citizen of the house or just a guest. So there, we just want to talk about that classification, which is very important. And Priyanka ji rightly differentiated between NPR and NRC. I would just like to add on that National Population Register is just a register of the entire population. Even non-residents, non-citizens would be covered in that. It is just a register of residents, citizens or non-citizens. The government should know who all are living where. If someone would commit some kind of an offense or kidnap someone, or some kind of a terror attack happens, at least you should have some kind of a documentation and the list of people that who all were living where. That is registration of population. NCR is just a register of citizens. So it will apply to all the people, irrespective of their caste, creed, religion, whatever faith they follow. It is nothing against Muslim, has nothing to do just with Muslims. It is just a normal citizenship law which applies to all the countries of this world. So India is no exception.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point, because there's where the confusion comes in. Now, let's talk about, let's say a Muslim person, or anybody, doesn't matter what religion they are, wants to emigrate to India. Can they still do it today? Can they just normally emigrate to India, Priyanka ji? What about, maybe you start and then Subuhi ji, you can talk about it. Just a normal person. Let's say I'm coming from Afghanistan, or a Muslim regular Muslim coming from Indonesia, Afghanistan, or even from the US, or a Christian person. Can they still come in?
I mean, come in to live, come in to visit, come in to...
Can they emigrate to India? Can they emigrate to India today?
You'll have
After
to,
CAA?
Yeah, of course they can. I mean, CAA is not applicable to them, but you do have to follow the rules of what proper migration rules. So if you come under that, that's fine. If you have a visa, like if you're coming in from the US, you have to have a 10-year visa, and of course you can come in. And that's, if you're American Muslim coming into India, you can do that with an American passport. There's nothing that can stop you. Citizenship Amendment Act for sure is not going to stop you. And now I think before I go to that, and the answer to your question is no. But I think one of the very confusing things is, I don't know if maybe this was the case in the USA, but one of the very confusing things of the NRC, and I think you alluded to it a little bit, Nikunj, in your question, was, what details need to be provided, right? And that's applicable here as well.
Yes.
Now, for the NRC, right, as Subuhi was saying, the NRC is basically a citizen register, right? And that's really important for the government to know, for just national security interests, for just general purposes. This is in every government, right? Now, what is needed in the NRC, what was actually elaborated by the government, was that you need to provide your place of birth and your date of birth, right? So now when you talk about religion, now if you think of to prove your place of birth in the US, right? The first thing I would do, if I got into grad school, for example, I had to prove my identification, right? I'm not going to pull out my US passport. The first thing I would pull out is my driving license, right? Because that proves my, right? So I think that was a source of confusion over here. And that was also taken in the wrong way, because details of a person's birth and place of birth were enough. Now, how to prove it? There's a bunch of different documents that can prove it, right? You don't need to show what religion you are, which is what the narrative was trying to say, that if you're, Muslim, then they're just going to give you a very hard time. That's impossible, because you can show your insurance papers, which doesn't have any religion of yours. You can show your driving license, which certainly doesn't state what religion you are. It may state your height and your weight, but it will not state your religion, right? You can show your Aadhaar card in India, right? You can show your address. You can show your, bank documents if they have your date and place of birth. There are many different, even a school certificate over here will have your name and place and date of birth. So I think that, as I can't say it enough, the narrative was just taken to the extreme, and for no reason at all, because that was the only rule specified so far, and still specified so far. They've not elaborated how they're going to do it. And I'm quite honestly very, very curious as to how they are going to do it, because kind of taking a register of 1.3 billion people is going to be a task, and it's going to take many, many years to do it. So,
yeah, absolutely. And the reason I bring this up, and I'll bring in some U.S. politics here. A few years ago, there was a discussion about the Trump administration bringing in a law about sort of certain countries not having people from certain countries emigrate to the U.S., right? And there was a huge issue happening here, and they called it the Muslim ban, right? And they took that particular U.S. kind of politics issue and superimposed that onto the India, and they called it, this is India's Muslim ban. So essentially, the CAA combined with NRC and NPR, et cetera, is going to be the India's Muslim ban, which again, for me, that was a shocker, because there's no such thing like that. There is no list of countries in India that says, oh, well, all these people from these countries are banned. Even with Pakistan and Bangladesh, et cetera, people are not banned from there. There's a different process for them to emigrate to India and stuff like that. So Subuhi, what are your thoughts on that? Like, is it, is it dangerous to call this a Muslim ban? Because it's not really a Muslim ban. There are certain, you talked about this earlier, but perhaps your thoughts on this whole idea of taking like a U.S. political issue and kind of superimposing it in India. Does it apply to India in that sense?
See, very good question, Nikunji. See, this kind of confusion is created by two kinds of people. One, the people who are behind the agenda of Islamic State, and this is not just happening to India. These people are, running this agenda throughout the world. People are being killed in Syria, people are killed in Europe, people are being killed in America, in Pakistan, China, India, wherever. So people who are trying to run this agenda of Islamic State, they have created a theory that Islam is in danger. So whenever something is done for the favor of humanity, whenever something is done to open the eyes of people, they will also they will always try to create a fake narrative that this is being done against Muslims. I, as an Indian Muslim, in the beginning of the video only, it was very important for me to tell you that how India is a country for Muslims. India has not just tolerated but celebrated Muslims, and not just Muslims, almost all the cultures of and the civilization of this world. As I said, that it is a melting pot of so many cultures, multicultural, multilinguistic, and such a beautiful country we have. Likewise, in America, I was talking about two kinds of people who create this confusion. One was the people who have this agenda of making the whole world an Islamic State. There is another force which is behind creating these fake narrative, which is the political parties. There are political parties who are in power or who remain in power by dividing people. Either they divide in black and white, or they divide in majority and minority. They just create a narrative that, okay, you are in danger, and if you want to be protected, you just vote for us, we will protect you. They have no intention of actually protecting you. When you talk about civil rights movements in America, we have been listening about civil rights for since ages. I have like grown up, like I'm almost 30 plus. I have been listening about civil rights for since ages, but still those people need their rights to be protected. Why? In India, we have listened, minorities are in danger, but still minorities need to be protected. Why? Because the people who run this agenda and they do the politics of dividing and rule, they do not want you to be uplifted. They do not want your pain to go away. They are like those, if I say in Desi Bhasha, they are like those makhi on zakhm. Like they just try to find out your problem areas, and abusive people they are like parasites. They will just stick on to your already painful area, and they will just feed on to your pain. They will use it for their political gain. So I would like to tell people that please do not get blackmailed, do not get emotionally incited by them, do not let them guide your rationality, your thinking capability, your decision making power, and do not let them divide you and put you in boxes. Whenever there is any kind of a confusion which is created, just go through it, read, and always read good people, always listen to good people, nationalist people, people who actually believe in human rights, not just who try to run an agenda of human rights. So I would like to say this on this question.
Right, excellent point. So let's talk about. We talked a lot about CAA and all these things. I want to switch a little bit on the Delhi riots. So there's been a lot of issues. Again, propaganda. There was a book that came out that analyzed the whole Delhi riots issue. So maybe Priyanka ji, you can start talking about what happened during the Delhi riots. Let's talk from a general perspective first, for the viewers to understand kind of where the situation was, and then we can talk about some of the specifics around it.
So the CAA led to massive anti-CAA protests, right? And the Delhi riots was kind of something that sprung out of those anti-CAA protests getting violent, right? So you had what shocked me the most, and what really made me question the intention of the CAA riots and the anti-CAA riots. Most of the ones that got violent, and I would think all of the ones that got violent, were the anti-CAA riots. But what really shocked me, they were making headways and front pages in all of the newspapers here, all of the online platforms. There'd be a riot springing up in Mumbai, they'd be in Delhi as well. What really shocked me and what made me question their intention was I saw a lady in a riot holding up a poster on 370, Article 370, which is Kashmir. So I was like, what is she doing there? Did she miss the point of the riot. Then, they went through all these celebrities, started endorsing anti-CAA as well over here. But then there were, I think that narrative kind of fell flat because they interviewed one of them, one celebrity at an anti-CAA rally, questioned him about, CAA. It was Farhan Akhtar. And he was just at a loss of words. I think that went completely viral. If not nationally, I hope it went viral internationally. But he was like, I believe his specific words to that were, I think, if so many people are gathered around here, there must be something wrong with it. So the man had no clue why the hell he was at the CAA protest. So you kind of knew they were just there to either get paid or to endorse something, or they had no clue what it actually was. Now, when you have a bunch of angry protesters not knowing exactly what it was, I went to the crowds and interviewed a bunch of people, all young people there. So I interviewed people my own age, little younger, students. What don't you like about the CAA? What is wrong with the CAA? What? They just couldn't answer. They were like, I don't know. I think, one guy thought that it was a anti sort of transgender rally. One thought it was an anti-gay rally. So they just had no clue why they were there. So this became violent, and it broke out in the Delhi riots. Now, there was quite a bit of violence. There were schools attacked. Different parts of Delhi were attacked because of this. We had Shaheen Bagh that was there for almost, I think, a little over a month. But what was really intriguing, and if you go back, whoever's watching this program, if you go back and look at the images from it, you'll see all of these, which is what made me really question, what is the origin of these riots? Why are these people so angry? And you'll see a bunch of mixed posters, abrogation 370, Article 370 abrogation, Kashmir abrogation. You'll see nothing to actually do with the CAA, which is ironic. So
just a bunch of lot of confused people in that crowd, for sure.
It was a bunch of confused people. Shaheen Bagh, there were paid protesters over there. That is a known fact on the ground. Plus confused people, plus angry people who are anti-national. So right there, that's not a good combination, right? You have all the makings of violence, which is why the riots broke out. And, the coverage of the riots is a whole different topic, but I think Subuhi, you can talk about it. And I think Nikunj, you'll probably ask me about that a little later.
Yeah, so exactly. So now, Subuhi, on your point, I think you had just a few days ago, or maybe a couple weeks ago, I don't remember, you had actually be on a newscast to talk about how there was groups like the Popular Front of India, for example, which is a very Islamist group, had paid people, I think it was like 20 or 30 crore rupees, in bank accounts and stuff like that, to show up at these protests and to cause a lot of issues. So can you elaborate on that?
Yes, absolutely. Nikunji, whenever there is an agenda which runs, there is always, money is involved in that, because people don't come out of their houses and gather in massive numbers just for nothing. Some people would actually know the agenda of Islamic State, but most of them are ignorant. Like in India, I see that there are three kinds of people: nationalists, like Rashtriya, Arashtriya, like people who are just ignorant, they don't know what's happening, and Deshdrohi, like anti-nationals. So Rashtriya people, like nationalists, know what is happening, and Deshdrohi anti-nationals know what is happening. But majority of the people are Arashtriya, like they are just confused. They're not connected to their motherland. They are not connected to their language, their culture, their history, and they're just clueless. So this agenda is run on the basis of these Arashtriya people only. That is why these conferences are important. Like you mentioned, PFI. I would like to bust one, the practice which is followed by, Islamic State agenda wala people. I always believe that when a child is born, nobody is a born terrorist. Like when we say that the child is the form of a god, or the child is Bhagwan, बच्चा भगवान होता है, तो कोई भी माँ के पेट से आतंकवादी पैदा नहीं होता. To make a child a terrorist, they have to go through a process. So they've made different organizations. Some organizations are separatist organizations. Like they just teach you, no, you can't use colors of holy, Allah will fry you in a hot pot of oil. They just put some inside, put some kind of a fear in a child's mind and just try to make them separate from others. And there are organizations which are doing this. There are Maulanas which are doing this. So, and these Maulanas, they go to almost each and every Muslim household, and Muslim kids are separated from the entire world. So there are separatist organizations, then there are extremist organizations. And once a child becomes a separatist, then it is easy to make him an extremist. Once he is made an extremist, then it is very easy to make him a terrorist. Like Al Qaeda or Hizbul Mujahideen or ISIS or Jaish e Mohammed, they cannot approach me and they cannot make Subuhi Khan a terrorist. They have to let you go through a process of separatism, extremism, and terrorism. Only then they can use you as a pawn to achieve their goal of Islamic State. And this process also needs funding. So there are institutions like PFI. So I think if we would understand this process, if we would understand these organizations, I would like to name few also. There are some Muslim kids who like namaz padna, roza karna. So there are institutions like Tablighi Jamaat to embrace such Muslims, and they in the garb of telling you karm kand and doing namaz and roza, they will incite those seeds of poison in your mind. Then some Muslim kids are interested towards academic. They have academic inclination. They want to read. So there are institutions like Darul Loom in India. We have Jamiatul Hind. There are academic institutions. And, in the garb of educating you, they will put seeds of terror in your mind. And some people are aggressive and assertive, and they want to do real, and they want to do action. For such Muslim kids, they have organizations like Jaish-e-Mohammed, Al-Qaeda, and such terror outfits. For funding, they have PFI. Earlier, it was SIMI. SIMI is now banned in India, but PFI is running on the same ideology. So, if we understand this narrative, it would not be rocket science to understand that no one is against Muslims. Subuhi Khan is celebrated in India. At times, I become so emotional at the kind of love and support and faith I get from people. So, a Muslim is never criticized or looked at with doubt in India. Has never been the case in India. It's just that Ghazwa-e-Hind has become such a big threat for India, and not just for India. The Islamic State has become such a big threat for the entire world that it is time for everyone, especially for Muslims, to open their eyes. For you, it is like I believe, as Subuhi Khan, as an Indian Muslim, I call myself a Sanatani Muslim. I believe that I have dual responsibility. As a Muslim also, it is my responsibility to tell that my Allah is the most beneficent, the most merciful. My Allah is the creator of the entire universe. Do not defame my Allah in the, to fulfill your agenda, political agenda of Islamic State. And as an Indian also, it is my responsibility to stand for my country. When there is a specific anti-national force which is acting in my country and operating in my country, it becomes my responsibility to fight against it. That is why I have actually waged jihad against jihad. So that is
And that's a
there.
very
And
important point.
yeah.
No, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Okay. I was saying that we were talking about CAA. You've already busted many myths about CAA. I would quickly like to bust few more. People ask that what about Muslims? Like you are giving citizenship or you're giving relief to these Hindus of these three neighboring countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. What about Muslims? If any Muslim is persecuted anywhere, or forget persecution, even if a Muslim just wants citizenship of India, would the person not get the citizenship in India? So as Priyanka ji mentioned, I would also like to cover it quickly, that as per Indian citizenship law, there are 5 ways to become a citizen of India. Either by birth, if you're born in India, you're a citizen. Either by descent, if either of your parents are born in India, you would be a citizen of India. By registration, if you're not a citizen but you want to become a citizen, you just apply, like you go and apply for an Aadhaar card. Even if you go and buy a SIM card, you have to give your identity card. Don't you give? So just fill a form by registration. You can become a citizen. By naturalization, like if you are living in India from the past 11 years, you can apply to become a citizen of India. And by acquisition, like if India acquire some place and you happen to be the citizen of that place, you automatically become the citizen of India. So if any Muslim wants to become a part of India or a citizen of India, the person has all these 5 options open for them. So this is no rocket science. It is just a myth which has been created. Another myth is this, that you asked in the beginning that CAA is anti-Dalit. I would like to tell you that the 34,000 people who are getting this benefit, almost 90% of these 34,000 are Dalits. So CA can never be anti-Dalits. At the
Yes.
time of partition, many Dalits were made, after partition, many Dalits were made to do menial jobs in Pakistan. Even today, they are, if you have to clean the toilet, if you have to do clean the gutter, you have to be from a specific faith. That kind of a government is running, an agenda is being run in that country. So this is nothing against Dalit. Another point, they say that, Modi ji, like, I'm so proud that, in my lifetime, I saw such a prime minister, and my country was lucky to get such a prime minister at this point, at this crucial point. Modi ji was very much required by the country. These anti-national forces are looking at him as a threat. Like in Uttar Pradesh, we have a very dynamic chief minister, Yogi ji. I'm a big fan of him. So many anti-national forces against Yogi ji also, because these people are afraid that, nationalist people and, national leaders like Modi ji has the power to, to fight with all these anti-national people, and all their anti-Bharat agendas will be busted. That is why they are creating a fake narrative that this is to make Hindu Rashtra. CA is to make Hindu Rashtra. Like 135 crore population we have in India. 34,000 people will make India a Hindu Rashtra. Can it happen? And then there is a cut-off date also. Like these 34,000 people are getting citizenship only if they have entered India till 31st December 2014. Had it been an agenda to make India Hindu Rashtra, it could have been for the indefinite time.
70 years.
Why was
Yes.
yes? Why would it limit to a specific date only, that people who've entered till this date only they will get the benefit? And last but not the least, in NRC, like these people are supporting, like against NRC, they are saying no, NRC should not be applied. In NRC, almost 7 crore infiltrators would be, identified. 7 crores. And in CA, only 34,000. So they are against these 34,000. These anti-national forces are against 34,000 and in favor of 7 crores. So imagine that, is this agenda of Hindu Rashtra or is this agenda of Islamic State? Of course, this is an agenda of Islamic State, because you are afraid that in NRC, many infiltrators, many illegal immigrants from different countries and spies, imposters would be identified. The only catch in CA and NRC, I would like to sum this up. The only catch is this, that you would have to produce your documents. So whoever is getting afraid of it, they either do not have documents or they have fake documents. That is the only fear they have, and just to save themselves from, that law, to save themselves from the bright future of India, and to run their agenda of Islamic State, to run their political agenda of, just ruling India. So they are just creating this fake narrative, that and nothing more than that.
No, and really interesting you bring up, and it's great. Thank you very much for summarizing that. I think it's really, really important as we kind of summarize that part of the discussion. And I think what's important for us to keep in mind is that many times people have this feeling that, Muslims are anti-India, or there's anti-nationals, and then there's this a narrative around how Hindus are doing this. But, I can tell you, I mean, when I came to in the US, I was young, but I grew up with a lot of Muslim kids, and I can tell you, Indian Muslims are very patriotic, and most of them don't really necessarily go into this. It's a group of people who are driven by political agenda, driven by the ideology of Islamist, state type of a thing, etc. Create these headaches and create these fake narratives. And having talked to many patriotic Indian Muslims, you can see, just like yourselves, that this is completely different. And I'm glad that you brought that up and you summarized that. So let's talk about, as we're getting closer to the end of this conversation, Priyanka ji, maybe we can talk about media, right? Both of you, Priyanka ji, you actually are in media. Both of you are frequently on media occurrences and everything like that. What is the role of media? Like, what is I would say, we understand that media has spun the narrative, but shouldn't it be supporting this humanitarian law rather than creating these fake narratives? What are your thoughts on that?
So that would be in an ideal world, and you mentioned media. If you go, I just went on Google right now, and I'd like to read this one sentence, right? I looked up 2020 Delhi riots. And the first thing that comes up on my Google is Wikipedia, right? And you see how pointed this narrative is, right? And you see how wrong this narrative is when you're talking about media coverage. Wikipedia says the 2020 Delhi riots, or Northeast Delhi riots, were multiple waves of bloodshed, property destruction, and rioting in Northeast Delhi beginning on the 23rd of February and caused chiefly by Hindu mobs attacking Muslims. You see how pointed that sentence is. And do you see how unfair that sentence is? Even if it's true, where are the facts supporting it? Is this journalism? Is this fair report? Is this free reporting? Is this democratic reporting? Is this representative of the fourth pillar of democracy, right? That we see both in the US and that we hope for and strive for in the US and in India. And as you said, Subuhi and I are both very involved in these panels, and it's honestly very frustrating at times. You had a publication during the Delhi riots, the Wall Street Journal, which is a very big publication. In fact, it came to my house when I was a kid in Chicago. I grew up reading that paper, and that was the paper, right, all the smart people used to read, right, because it was just so complicated to understand. But I looked at Delhi riots, and they had a misrepresented, they lied in the Wall Street Journal. What had happened was the brother of an officer who was killed during the riots, they had quoted him. And then that brother came out on social media and said, hey, I never said this. So you just have to think that, what have I been reading all of these years, right? Has it been real? Have they just made something up over here? You had one other major publication, I believe it was the Indian Express, right? Now, when they say, like Wikipedia says, it was chiefly by Hindu mobs attacking Muslims. Now, to promote this narrative, they called it a pogrom. And a pogrom is a very, very powerful word, right? That basically, I mean, it's close to more violence than what a riot should be, right? It's a very different meaning. Now, in the Indian Express, they cropped an image, right? And they cropped it in a way to crop the guy's skull cap that he was, that was a Muslim skull cap that he was wearing, right? So it easily identified him as a Muslim, and he was shown throwing and pelting stones on people in a protest or people on the street. And they purposely cropped just that part out. And that also came in social media, that this is what this paper is doing. And they forwarded this narrative of Hindu mobs attacking Muslim, peaceful Muslim citizens of India.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying, I think that reporting is very incorrect, because why is this about communal politics in the first place, right? This is about Delhi riots, and citizens of India, whether they are Muslim, whether they are Hindu, whether they are Jain, whether they are atheists, they are getting hurt and they are being under attack, right? Their lives are being put in danger because of these riots in Delhi. So Delhi citizens' lives are at risk. So to answer your question, it was very frustrating to see that the focus of media was on this pogrom narrative, which was absolutely false, rather than actually looking at Delhi as a whole, right? Looking at the country as a whole, saying that, hey, these riots are actually endangering citizens' lives, endangering property. Why should it be targeted towards one community or another? It was very, very frustrating to me. And I really thank God that today we have the power of social media. That's where I have sort of chosen to go, rather than I've joined TV9. I'm part of TV9 Digital, though, because I do think that power of social media is that citizens can now come out and call it out, right? And a lot of citizens now are unafraid to do that, thanks to the Prime Minister, thanks to confidence of other voices on social media as well. You're unafraid to call out, and you're not afraid of being trolled. I mean, it's the truth. So very frustrating experience, but I mean, there has to be someone. There have to be people like Subuhi and I to kind of fight this narrative, and of course you, Nikunj ji. So it's as frustrating as it is a necessary effort, and I encourage whoever's watching, if you've taken the time to watch me blabber on, I think it's really important to put your voice out there, because that's what I started doing on my Twitter. I started with, I think, 300 followers who are all my alumni. Nobody else was interested in listening to me, and I forced those alumni to become my followers. So but because I was putting out the facts and really fighting these myths with facts, right? Like, where is the proof of this? Let's get to the bottom of this. I think that's really important for citizens to do. And I think that citizen journalism is going to play a big part in Indian journalism going forward, especially on digital platforms.
Citizen journalism. I really like that. I think it's very important and very powerful. Like the fact that we're having this conversation, at the peak of this discussion, we had about 180 people live, and then this video is making the rounds too. But the idea is social media certainly has a huge impact, and both of you have very large followings now. Thanks to social media, right?
Just one thing. I never had the confidence before because I'm like, who's going to listen to me? Like I said, it was just my friends and they had no interest, to be honest, in what I had to say. Very few likes and retweets. But don't feel that your voice is just very insignificant because it is really powerful.
Yeah. So let's do this. I would like to give you guys one minute each to kind of give some advice and tips for US Hindus and Canadian Hindus who are fighting this false propaganda, and it's making a real impact in their lives. And we'll see the student discussion a little bit later. What are your advice? What are your thoughts of what they should be doing, how they can fight this propaganda, and really take the narrative back, saying this is a humanitarian law that is protecting persecuted people from our community. It's not some anti-anybody law in that sense. So Subuhi, maybe you start first.
Yes, Nikunji, very good question, and my favorite question in the entire discussion. See, people who are fighting for this cause, people who are speaking up for these persecuted minorities, I understand that you have to answer so many technical questions. At times, like being a lawyer, it becomes easy for me to answer the questions. For a layman, maybe it would become a little difficult to clear those doubts. But I really salute your emotion, your courage that you're doing it. Keep doing it. Like I am on social media, you can contact me, or if you have any questions regarding CAA, and if you're not able to find any reasons or logic to convince the other person, you can ask me the question. And you can also email me at subuhikhan7@gmail.com. I would personally answer each and every query regarding CAA specifically, because right now we are doing this conference on CAA. Keep doing it. As Priyanka ji rightly mentioned, that even one single voice matters. Never think that you do not have a huge fan following, so your voice doesn't count. You are just planting seeds, and you never know which seed will become a tree, and you never know which seed is going to, do what for the country and for the humanity, maybe. So each step is important. Each step counts. One message I have, Nikunji, for people who are speaking against CAA, and specifically people who are ignorant about it, who are just getting carried away with the false narrative. I'm just giving a simple test to them. You know, to Indian Americans and Indians who are living in America, to Hindus who are living in America, just imagine for a second. Leave aside what someone is saying. Leave aside what Nikunji is saying, what Priyanka ji is saying, what I am saying. Just leave everything, close your eyes, and think for a moment. Imagine that you are being persecuted in America. God forbid, khuda na khasta, you are being persecuted in America or in any country on the basis of religion. You're being raped, murdered, slaughtered. Just imagine that pain for a moment. Who would you look up to? Which country would you look up to? Of course, you would look up to the place where you belong. You would look up to the place of your genesis, the place of your origin. These people, these persecuted minorities of Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, they have no place to go. There is nobody to listen to their plight. So please do not become pawns of anti-national people, of people who are against humanity. Opposing CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act, is like opposing humanity. I would like to conclude on this. Just think and introspect on this, what I just said, and I think you would get the answer, because that moral compass within, that the Paramatma who's residing within would definitely give you the right answer, and I'm 100% sure about that. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Excellently summarized. Thank you so much, Subuhi. Priyanka ji, go ahead, please.
So that's a tough act to follow, Subuhi. I think you summarized it really well.
Yeah, but you have
But
a different
just
experience. You've grown up here, so you can empathize with the kids that are going through some of that stuff. So maybe you want to directly target that also.
Yeah,
Yes,
what I was
absolutely.
going to say is, for someone who has not lived in India, for I would say a very recent resident of India, right? I went to elementary school in Chicago. I went to high school in Chicago. I graduated from Illinois, went to Harvard, had no plans of coming to India, and then came to India in 2018, right? So for someone like me, I think that to get introduced to these issues firsthand. Of course, you read about it in the US, but as I said, I too was looking at pictures of and papers like the Wall Street Journal and getting my news from there, right? So it's really difficult to decipher what the right narrative is and what the wrong narrative is, and if there is a right or wrong narrative, and then how are you going to apply that for every single thing you read? It just becomes very overwhelming. And it's hard enough to get high school kids. I remember I was a debater, and my mom used to tell me, well, how are you a debater in high school if you never read the newspaper? I mean, how does that even happen? So it's very hard to get. I can understand it, right? You don't have the time, and that kind of comes with more experience, that you read different sources of news. But what I would suggest is, the like I said before, for Shaheen Bagh, right? It really didn't even hit me that something is fishy going on. There's something really off of this narrative. Somebody new to kind of this entire world of Indian politics, right? What struck me, as I said, for Shaheen Bagh, for the CAA protests were these posters for Article 370 Kashmir and other things which had nothing to do with CAA. So that's when I started looking it up, and that's where I realized, the importance of looking things up. Don't just follow something that you've read in the news. It just takes maybe 1 or 2 extra minutes of your day, especially if you do consume news, on apps and things like that. It takes maybe 1 to 2 extra minutes of your day to kind of look and see, well, where exactly is this detention center? Where is it located? What is happening over here? Who is this person who's being quoted in the Wall Street Journal? Can I look him up on social media? Can I look him up on Twitter? Can I look him up on Facebook? Go in depth if you have any questions, if you see something kind of not making sense. I would say take the time to really go and look it up, because that will really help you. It's like I said, CAA was a 3-page document. I wouldn't even say 3 pages, Nikunj. It was 2.5 pages. So if I'm not mistaken, it was like really, really short, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's a really short thing to
Absolutely.
read. And once I read it, I was like, oh, I mean, it took me a minute to read the entire thing. And I'm like, there's really, like, what is this chaos all about? So try to do that. And you have the magic of Google. This kind of gives away my age, but unlike high school students today, we had to look things up in encyclopedias. And I remember the Encyclopedia Britannica in the library and things like that. And the internet came, a little later. Even the use of the internet, as much as we use it today, came a lot later for us. So you guys have the power of Google. Just do a Google search on these things. CAA was available right there and then. It took me a minute to read it. And then I was clear on what my opinion is. So what I would say is, before you make an opinion on something and decide to, go with one narrative or the other, make sure you do a fact check for yourself, right? If someone asks me this question, am I able to answer it for them? Is the CAA anti-Muslim, right? Well, why is it anti-Muslim? If you can answer that, and if you're logical, and if you're objective in your answer, fine. I'll debate you on it, right? And then we can agree to disagree. But if you can't answer it, then you know that you're just kind of following one narrative or the other. So I advise you not to do that, because it's really, really important. Because this narrative is costing, not just damage to property, but damage to lives, and innocent lives as well. So
Absolutely.
It's as much of a responsibility for the government. It's as much, I say, citizens' responsibility to know what's really going on and to question.
Yes, and you've put it very well. I think that's what I encourage also, and people who want to read more about the actual act and stuff like that, they can go to kona.org/CAA. We've created a resource page with all the videos, with some of the news coverage, and the actual document that was published by the government of India in the Gazette, right? So people can actually read it and say, this is what the law really is. So it's 2.5 pages, and it's very easy to just see what the law is. So I'm glad both of you, Subuhi ji and Priyanka ji, you joined this panel today. Very, very enlightening discussion, and I learned a lot, certainly. This is not the last discussion that we're going to be having. There's a lot more I'm looking forward to working with both of you on, and how we can try to impact the narrative through social media, through other types of media like the TV9 channel and other places that you guys are connected to, because together we can make a difference. And it's really about Satyameva Jayate, right? The truth shall prevail. Ultimately, the truth shall prevail, but the truth needs our help today. It's not truth shall prevail. Truth needs our help, and then truth shall prevail. Because if we don't do the kshatriyata, if we don't become the kshatriya, the warriors for dharma, for India, for our communities, there is no way we're going to be able to make a difference as we go forward, because there is a lot of propaganda out there, and kids who are not familiar with our way of doing things, our Hindu dharma, our values, and even about what India is as a country and as a civilization and as a concept, we're never going to be able to fight this false propaganda. So I'm really happy. I want to thank both of you for joining the panel today. I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. Namaskar.